Hey Algebra 1! Today's notes are about graphing an equation that's in slope-intercept form. So in your notebook, you should have a new table of contents. Mine was on page 29 and 30. And these notes cover our first learning target. I graph equations in slope-intercept form and write equations from graphs. These notes are in page 31 on my notebook. For these notes, you need two different colored highlighters and a writing utensil. So slope-intercept form, you are probably familiar with. It looks like y equals mx plus b. So x and y we've talked about before. X is our input. Y is the output. In slope-intercept form, the parts of this equation we're really interested in are m, so use one color to talk about m, and b. Use your second color for b. So m stands for the slope. Slope is our change, or delta y over delta x. Change in y over change in x. B stands for the y-intercept of our function. So the first thing we need to be able to do is identify slope and y-intercept from an equation. So all of these equations are in slope-intercept form, which means they look like y equals mx plus b. So we find our slope, or the m, as the coefficient of x. So in this first problem, my coefficient of x is 2/3. So that's my slope. B, or the y-intercept, is the constant at the end of our equation. So in this first example, my constant is -5. In the second example, I'm looking for my slope, coefficient of x. My coefficient of x is -2. When I write this, I am going to write it as a fraction. So it would be -2/1. I'm going to write it as a fraction so that I can see my rise and my run. And our y-intercept, or the constant, +12. Sometimes things get a little weird. In this third example, it looks like x does not have a coefficient. But I know that means there is an invisible 1 hanging out there. So my slope for this one is +1. So as a fraction, that would be 1/1. And my y-intercept, or the constant, is -3. The other thing that can get weird happens in our fourth example. So x has a coefficient of 3/4. So my slope is 3/4. What I don't see is b. That's because b in this case is 0. If I'm adding 0, I don't have to write that down because it doesn't change anything in my equation. So the +0 is invisible. And our y-intercept would be 0. Try the bottom two equations. Identify your slope and y-intercept for each one. I'll wait until you try those. Make sure you check your answers when you're done. I'll have the answer keys posted on the front board. So on the inside, now that we can find our slope and y-intercept, we are going to graph slope-intercept form. And conveniently, the first step here is to identify slope and y-intercept. Once we have found the slope and y-intercept, we start graphing by plotting the y-intercept. And I know a y-intercept goes on the y-axis. So it's a point that's going to look like 0, whatever that y value is. Once I have my y-intercept, in order to make more points on my graph, I use the slope. Once I have a bunch of points on the path, I connect them and draw arrows on each end of my line. So for our first example, my linear function is the equation y equals 1/3 x plus 2. So my slope is 1/3. My y-intercept is positive 2. So I know I'm plotting the point positive 2. So my y-intercept is at 0, 2. So this point right here. My slope is 1/3. So this is my rise and my run. So that means for this problem, I'm going up 1 and to the right 3. So starting from my y-intercept, I'll rise 1 and run 3. And I will just keep doing that until I run out of space. So rise 1, run 3, rise 1, run 3. I don't have space to add any more points. To continue my line in the other direction, I will do the opposite. So this time it would be down 1 and to the left 3. So these points continue the pattern just in the opposite direction. Down 1, left 3, down 1, left 3 until I run out of space. Connect all the points, put arrows at the end because that pattern will keep repeating until infinity. Try the second one on your own. Find your y-intercept. What is that point going to be? 0, what? And then find the slope. Which way does this one tell you to move? Pause the video, graph that line, and then check your answers when you're done. Together, we are going to graph y equals -4/5 x. This problem has a slope of -4/5, which tells me my rise is -4. So I'm going down 4, and my run is +5. So I'll be going to the right 5. In this problem, I don't see a y-intercept. So I know my y-intercept is 0. I didn't leave myself any space. My y-intercept is at 0, 0. So that's my first point. I plot a point right here at 0, 0. I use my slope, -4/5, to make more points. So starting from my y-intercept, I go down 4 and to the right 5. Down 4 and right 5. I'll continue this pattern in the opposite direction. This time I'm going up 4 and left 5. Up 4 and left 5. I fit as many points as I can on here. I draw the line and put arrows on both ends. Try graphing the function y equals x plus 6. Figure out what your slope is, figure out what your y-intercept is, pause the video, graph that function. When you're done, check your answers on the board. The last thing that you need to be able to do for these notes is write an equation in slope-intercept form if they give you the graph. So our first step here is totally the same. I still need to identify the slope and the y-intercept. Can you tell these are really important features of our function? This time I'm going to be identifying the slope and the y-intercept on the graph. So once I have found M and B, all I have to do is write my equation in slope-intercept form, which means I have to fill in a number where M is and fill in a number where B is. So for our first example, I find my y-intercept on the y-axis. So my function crosses the y-axis at 0. So B is 0. Now to find the slope, I need to identify another point on this line, and a nice, easy to read point. So I'm not going to pick this point because I can't really read where that is. I would estimate that maybe it's kind of at like 0.2, 1, but maybe that's like really 0.4, 1. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to estimate. So I want a nice, easy to read point like this one right here. This point is at 1, 3. So now to find my slope, to find my rate of change, I find my rise over run. I have to go 3 and to the right 1. So my m is a positive 3 over 1. So if I put those together, my equation would be y equals m is 3. I fill in my x. And then plus b would be plus 0. You don't need to write the plus 0, so I could write this as y equals 3x without the plus 0. I could also write this as y equals 3 over 1x. Any of these answers are perfectly okay. Oh, I copied the same graph twice. Darn it. Okay. Cross out the second example. It's the same as the first one. Oops. Okay. Last example. We are looking for the same things. So first, my y-intercept, my b. I check out my y-axis. My function crosses the y-axis right here at positive 2. I'm looking for my slope, so I need another easy to read point. I'm not choose this one. Awkward, I'd have to estimate, but this one looks like a good one. So to find my rate of change, I need my rise, I run. So I rise 1 and run 2. So my slope is 1/2. When I put this equation into slope-intercept form, it's y equals mx plus b. So 1/2 x plus 2 for my final equation. Once you are done with your notes, glue them into your notebook on page 31 or whatever your next page is after your table of contents and start homework 15.